Okay, we're going to explain the program that we've written for this guessing game now. I'm going to start just by running what we've got. When we run, we have this main menu and we have some different options. 1, 2, 3 or 0. 1 is start a new single player game. And I've implemented this for you so you can see how that works. A 2-player game hasn't been implemented yet, nor has showing the high score table, and quick game has been implemented. Notice it tells you what the current best score is. There is a high score table being implemented, but I just haven't implemented this option 3 for showing it. But it always shows the best score so far on just underneath the main menu. So let's kick off by running a new single player game. So we choose option number 1, and it's asking us to input a guess. Now, the idea is that the computer has thought up a random number between 1 and 100, and we need to guess what it is. So maybe we start off with 50, and we're told that that's too low. So we know we input something else. So let's go halfway between 50 and 100. 75, that's also too low. 87, that's too high. So it's somewhere between 75 and 87. And we could maybe have 80 perhaps. That's too high, so maybe 77. Too low, 78. Too low, 70. It must be 79. Here we go. So once we get the correct answer, it tells us how many guesses that we had, and then it asks us to input our name for the high score table. So let's do that. So here I'm going to put David. I might need to sort this out a little bit, make this a little bit neater, make this consistent with a colon and then a space. So I'll do that in just a second. So I type in David, press enter, and there we go. Now you can see there's a high score in this text file over here. Hopefully that will come up. Just open this up a little bit. This is the high score table that we've got, and you can see that it writes out the high score table, but it's not sorted in necessarily correct order. It will sort itself out later on, and you'll see in the code when we go through the code where it does that. And that's probably one of the tasks I'd like you to do, is to make sure this is always stored in sorted order. Okay, so it's, we've got the main menu again now, so we could maybe have another go. Or input a guess. 50, too high. 25, too low, so somewhere between 25 and 50. 35 perhaps, still too low. Try 40, still too low. 45, too high, so 43, too high. It's either 42 or 41. 41, too low, wrong one. 42. There we go, correct in 8 guesses. And again, I can put my name in, and we get the main menu again. So it basically keeps going round, and we can keep selecting to have a new single player game. Right, okay, so let's just quit out of that. So option 0 is to quit. So that doesn't work at the moment. So that's something else that you'll need to look at, perhaps quitting out. Okay, let's have a look at the code then. So the code's up here. Let's just close this console window for a minute. And we'll start off by looking right down at the bottom. This is the piece of code that first gets run because it's not inside a function, and it calls main menu. And main menu is this function here, main menu at the top. And we can show the main menu and decide whether or not we show the high score. And when we mean the high score, actually we mean the lowest score, because the lowest score is better, right? Fewer guesses is better. But nevertheless, I call it the high score. We've got a file name for the high score file. So that's this file here where we're storing the scores that get created. And we've got something called a high score list. And what a high score list is doing is it's storing a list of what we call tuples. We talked about that, I think, earlier in the course. So basically a tuple is something that looks like this. So it might be the name, David, and the score that they got. So each element in the list is a tuple that looks something like that. Let's just do it again. The name and then the score. And each of those is stored in a list. And that's what we're using to actually have an internal representation of the high score list, the list of high scores, is this list with these tuples in it. Then we have a main menu text, which is just this string. We can donate multiple line strings by using three inverted, there's three, what are these called? Speech marks, quotes, I would say, quotes. And then we've got main menu, and then we list the different elements here. Now we've got a while loop now, while not quit game. So that's basically going to go round and round and keep going round while quit game is false. So we're going to make sure that quit game is false to start with, to ensure that this loop executes at least once. That's a typical sort of thing you do with while loops, remember. We've also got this variable called main menu choice, which is basically once this menu is being displayed to the user, they type in a number to choose something from the menu, and that is that particular choice, and we store it in a variable called menu choice. Okay. And we've set it, by the way, to -1, meaning that there hasn't been a choice made yet, because -1 isn't one of the options. Okay, so let's see what's happening. So we're saying we want to, when we've got the main menu, the first thing that we actually do is to load the high score list from a file. So we'll have a look to see what that looks like in a moment. But we'll load the high score from a file, and we're loading it into this thing called high score list. Now here we're checking to see if the high score list length is greater than 0. In other words, there has been at least something stored in the high score table. Then we're going to sort it. And that sorts the list in ascending order of scores. So we're going to have the lowest scores first in the list. And then what I'm going to do is I want to pick out what the current best score is. Now, if I've sorted it into order, so for example, like this, I know this isn't sorted into order, ignore the David 8 at the top at the moment. So if we've got, let's say this, if this is sorted into order into these tuples, then the first element in the list, which is this line basically, is going to contain the best score because we've sorted it, right? And this one after it is basically picking not this first entry, the name, but the actual score. So that's that 4 there, or the 8, the 4 here, the 5 here, the 5 here, etc. That's the first element inside this row. And when I mean the first element, I mean this is the 0th element. The name is the 0th, and the score is the number 1th element. So what we've got then is the current best score, and the current best person who got that score is basically the 0th element of that row. So we pick out the first row, and this is going to be the person who's got that lowest score, and this is going to be the score. Now, if there isn't anything in the list, then the current best score we're going to set at 1,000, and we're setting the current best person to be Dr. Wild. So basically, if nobody's had a go yet, we're assuming that somebody's come along called Dr. Wild and they got a score of 1,000, which isn't a great score, but still, nevertheless. And then we want to print the main menu text. So we want to make sure that this main menu is displayed on the screen. And straight underneath it, if we've been asked to show the high score in this parameter, then we're going to print a blank line underneath the main menu and then print out what the current best score is and who achieved that best score. And if you remember, when we do that here, that's this line here, current best score 4 by whoever it is that scored it. So that's what that line, oops, excuse me, that's what that line does. And then we're going to get a choice. Now we use a function here that we've written ourselves called getInteger. And the purpose of getInteger is to get an integer from the keyboard between 0 and 3. 0, 1, 2, or 3. And this is the prompt that we're going to put up there. So that basically calls up this function called getInteger, which we'll show you later, that insists that the user type something in between 0 and 3 and that they're integers. And if they're not, it will ask again and say that's an invalid choice. We'll see that later. And then we see if they choose menu item 0, so if they chose 0 for here, that's quit the game. If you remember, this didn't quite work. Then quit game becomes true. And if quit game is true, next time round, this while loop will not execute. And therefore, the main menu should quit. Okay? Now, if, however, we choose item number 1, which is the single player game, then we have this function called play game, and it sends this high score list that we've got into that function. So we're going to look at that now, this thing called play game. Okay, so play game takes in a high score list and whether or not it's a single player or not. Now I've only implemented the single player at the moment. I'm not even using this parameter anywhere, which is by incidentally, I don't know if you can notice that this grayed out. It's very slightly less dark than this text here. And the reason for that is that this variable is never being used anywhere, which means, and in fact, the pie chart here tells me that parameter single player value is not used. And I'd like you to implement that. So I'd like you to use this parameter somewhere in this play game subroutine and change it to accommodate single and two player games. And then we've got something called an answer. Now this is basically what the correct answer is. In other words, ask the computer to generate a random number from 1 to 100. In order to do that, we use this file called random. And you'll see right at the very top, we import random. So that's something that Python gives you, the ability to create random numbers. So let's go back to our play game. So that's how that's done. And correct is determining, is the guess that the person has correct? In other words, is their guess equal to the secret value that they're asked to find? If it is, we set this value to correct to be true. If not, it will be false. So correct is a Boolean. This here, guess, is equal to or compared to answer. That's also a Boolean. So we're setting this thing called correct as to determine whether or not they've guessed it correctly or not. If they haven't, then if the guess is bigger than the answer, we print a message, say too high, otherwise it's too low. So that's if it's not correct. If it is correct, this is this else statement. We say print correct, you answered in, and we've got this thing called num guesses. And num guesses is just something that gets increased by 1 every single time we go round this while loop. And that's the thing that sort of stores how many guesses we've had in our game. And then we're asking for the name, input your name for the high score. This is this correction that we should make. Put in maybe a space, a colon, and then another space, just to tidy that up a little bit. And then we're going to append to the high score list this, this actual score that we've got here. And this is where the problem lies. This is why we've got this high score with this David 8 at the top. And the reason being is that after we've appended it, I'm not sorting it. So there's a little line in here. I'm going to put a to-do there. And maybe you can change that yourselves. Remember now to sort the list since a new element has been added. So that's how we ask ourselves to do to-dos or reminders that we need to code something in there. And afterwards, we return from this function both two parameters, the number of guesses that they took and the name, whatever their score was. Right, so that's basically how things work. We did talk about this getInteger function that I've created here that takes in a minimum, a maximum value, a prompt, and whether or not to include the min and max in the prompt or not. So when you see your input your guess, if it includes the prompt, include min max in prompt, then it will put some square brackets in to tell us what the possible values are for input. Okay, and then basically we've got this idea of a TryAccept block here. So basically what happens is, if I know that this is going to be an integer, or I want it to be an integer when I'm inputting one of these numbers, if I don't put something that is an integer, if I put in like 3.5, that's not a valid choice, right? So I can't cast it to an integer, and that will throw an error and the program will crash. Well, this TryAccept enables me to trap that potential problem, and if there is a problem in trying to convert the input value into an integer, I print up a little message to say invalid entry and try again. And basically, it will keep asking and go round this while loop continuously until I type something that is correct in there. Just to show you that, down in the program here, I could input a choice from the menu from 0, 1, 2, or 3, so I could put 4.6, and it says invalid entry, try again. Or I could put in some rubbish text, and again, invalid entry, try again. So that's basically what's going on here. It's come across, it can't convert this to an integer. That's been trapped by this TryAccept. In the exception, prints, if an exception occurs, it prints this little message, and then we go round this while loop again and ask for the input again. Okay, there's a couple of other things, which is using something from a comma-separated variable file. So you'll notice that this high score is comma-separated variables. You may have come across those before, maybe using Excel or other sorts of data files, whereby we've got a comma that separates two bits of data and then a new line that then separates another bit of data. So each line is a piece of data, if you like, and each piece of data has, in this case, two elements to it. Python includes this thing called CSV that enables you to deal with those in a nice way. I'm not going to go through that in great detail now. If you want to read more about that, have a look at this code that we've got here and look up, just do a search, Google search for CSV files in Python, and you'll find that there's plenty of documentation on how this works. But essentially what I'm doing is going through and I'm adding to each line in the file the name and the score. Oops, I just changed those around by mistake. The name and the score that's in the list. Okay, that's what I'm doing there. And I've said that I want to be able to sort the list, because if I had a new high score, a new score that somebody's got, I want to put that into the right place in the high score table. So we've talked about bubble sort before, so I'm using a bubble sort algorithm to sort the list. So again, you've been through this before. You might want to sort of revisit this and have a look to see what's going on. But that's the bubble sort algorithm. There are other better sorting algorithms, and in fact Python provides its own ability to sort, but because we've just looked at the bubble sort algorithm, I decided to utilize it in here. Why not? We're not sorting very large lists anyway, well, unless of course the game's been played for months on end. Okay, so I'll leave you to have a look at the program, and your tasks are, first of all, I would like you to be able to alter this play game function so that we can play multiple player games. So what that should do is, if you're playing a multiple player game, you want to ask for the two people's names, And the idea is that player one will have a go at guessing. If they get wrong, they'll say it's now player two's go, and they have a go. If they get it wrong, then it's player one's go again, player two's go, and it alternates between them. And whoever wins is the person who gets the go on the high score table.